This morning I want to ask you, does it feel like sometimes your best intentions to move forward with something gets covered over or gets flooded with problems as you try to advance, maybe grow spiritually, do something wonderful for your family, create a better retirement portfolio, whatever it is, it gets covered over or flooded over with problems. And would it feel comforting to know that you don't have to fight the rising floodwaters, that there is a spiritual principle that we can use to take ourselves out of that avalanche of seeming problems? We are continuing in our series this month, as I mentioned earlier, in the power of the divine masculine in our consciousness. And today we're going to look at Noah, the Noah state of consciousness. And he's going to show us that when we're obedient to the guidance of God, we will never be flooded with negative conditions without experiencing tremendous rewards. Now, a lot of people, I want to stop and put a little parentheses there. Maybe you've heard me, maybe I've said this before, I don't remember, the word obedient, if we're obedient to the will of God. But at its Latin root, the word obedient is ober, which means to hear or to listen at depth. So when you listen at depth to God, you're guided. I always think when, we don't say anymore, well, you'd be probably tarred and feathered if you continue to say in the wedding vows, do you love, honor, and obey each other? But think about it, if your wedding vows, do you love, honor, and agree to listen to each other at depth? How might that marriage be? How might that marriage be? So I like the word obey. We're obedient to the guidance of God, then we're never going to be flooded with this negativity, an avalanche of negativity. The story of Noah is found in Genesis chapters 6 through 9, and it begins with this, I want to start with this one phrase because it's kind of significant to what we're doing. This is Let There Be Light by Elizabeth Sand Turner. She wrote a 3-work volume. Let There Be Light is the Old Testament. Your Hope of Glory is the New Testament. And Be Ye Transformed is Acts through Revelation, metaphysical interpretation for the layperson. Not all the heavy duty, like right out of the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. Anyway, Elizabeth Sand Turner was one of the minister at Nashville. Her mother, Elizabeth Sand, was not ordained, and so they sent Elizabeth up to Unity Village, and she studied with the Fillmores, and was ordained and came back. Nashville started in 1917, so that's 100 and something years ago. 1917. And Elizabeth was ordained and became the minister at Nashville in 1933. So then she wrote these books and left the ministry and went on tour with her books on metaphysical interpretation. So this is from the roots of Nashville this morning, but it talks about her word on Noah and the flood. So I'll remind us of the story. Noah was instructed to build an ark into which he and his wife and his 3 sons and their wives, together with 2 of every living creature, were to retire during the flood that was to cover the earth. So that's kind of what's happening. But in chapter 6, verse 5, it says, And Jehovah saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Every imagination of the thoughts of your heart, isn't that your belief? Was on evil continually. Evil continually. And so what happens then, people were languishing in a negative state of consciousness, and so spiritual law responds to our state of consciousness. So spiritual law brought a flood of negativity into those lives, sent the flood to cleanse the negativity. And we saw that Noah was instructed to build this ark, and he was given in a masculine energy. You guys are detailed. He's given very specific instructions on the dimensions of the ark and all the stuff. And then he gathered all the people together, reigned for how long? 40 days,
40
and
nights.
40 nights, right, until the whole earth was flooded with water. That's the interactive part of the service today. It's your pop quiz, and you get it all right. When the water subsided, he went ashore and he built an altar to God, and he made a commitment to always listen to God, to follow God. And in response, God made a covenant with Noah that he would never destroy the earth by flood again. And he gave the rainbow as an eternal sign of that covenant. Now, in unity, we don't believe in a punishing, scorekeeping God. And we don't interpret the flood as a means of God punishing humankind because they were living in evil behavior. Neither God nor spiritual law is set up to harm us. So then what's going on if there's this flood that comes and wipes everything out? The Metaphysical Bible Dictionary says, when the faculties of our mind have been used in wrong relationship to truth, okay, certain destructive processes set in. The earth is in a state of corruption, meaning our consciousness is in, the faculties of our mind have been used in wrong relation to truth, and so destructive processes have set in because our consciousness is in a state of corruption. And that's when, Metaphysical Bible Dictionary says, that's when spiritual law begins to regulate our consciousness with a flood. The flood is sent to regulate or restore us to balance. The flood represents, and you said, you didn't even know, you said it in your meditation, the baptism of spirit. Now that was a new thing that I learned this week when I was studying, because you always think of the flood spiritually and metaphysically as waters, and waters are cleansing, right? Water represents cleansing. But the baptism of spirit floods upon us to bring us back into alignment with spirit. So when we get out of consciousness, when we get our consciousness in wrong relationship to something, when we're living in evil, I have that in my notes here, the word evil, Jehovah saw the wickedness of man was great on earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was on evil continually. The word evil is the word live, spelled backwards, right? So when there's a flood of negativity in your life, you want to look to see if you're living backwards from your God self, if you're living backwards from the truth of who you are. How many of you have been in a relationship and you got out of it, out of divorce or whatever, and one of your phrases was, I lost myself in that relationship. I lost myself. I was so consumed. I wasn't living the truth of who I was or who I am. So you want to look at what that flood is revealing to you, because there's a marvelous opportunity to have all kinds of aha moments, all kinds of awakening. Just as there's a flood of spiritual baptism, then that means there's a flood of light coming into you to reveal how to get back on track, right? Thoughts immersed in anxiety, fear, and worry produce a flood of negative problems. But the mind stayed on spirit is all powerful to produce good. We know that. We teach that here every week, don't we? Well, like Will at the beginning of the story, he found when he had his downtime that he had been very impatient with his employees, and that he had been very demanding of the vendors, and that he had been arrogant with his investors, and that he'd been neglectful of his family, and that he was fearful of failure, and this flood of pain that slowed him down to be able to see these ways that he was living backwards from his true self, from the success that he wanted to achieve in his company. And every little trickle of negativity for him grew into a stream, and then a roaring river, and then a flood where nothing was working, and then it showed up in an illness. So this morning, the question we want to ask is, how do we use our Noah faculty to rise above a flood? And let's look spiritually at Noah's name and his character was surprising to me. It means rest and calm and peace. Rest and calm and peace. And we're told that he walked with God and that he stayed in that consciousness of God. And when we discipline our minds to live from a consciousness of calm, we're in connection with spirit. And when we have a regular spiritual practice of prayer and listening, we train the imaginings of our heart to be on good, so that all the little stream of thoughts and the tributaries and the rivers flood our life with good. Right? So Noah is that aspect of consciousness that stays in that calm, peaceful relationship to spirit, that has a regular discipline of practice and listening within. And when we're in that space, we're receptive to the guidance of spirit. And so the spirit says to Noah, build an ark. Build an ark. And the ark, Miss Turner says, the ark represents a positive saving state of consciousness, which agrees with or forms a covenant with the principle of being. So there's a saving, positive saving state of consciousness which makes a covenant with the Lord of your being. This consciousness is built when we rest in God and seek to do His will. Noah. So we build this consciousness in the Noah consciousness. The practical lesson to be derived from Noah and the flood is that regardless of how destructive the conditions surrounding us, if we are in tune with the Spirit of truth indwelling, we shall be saved from the devastation that overwhelms those negative states of mind. So you might be living like Will in fear of failure of your business and impatience with your employees or whatever it is, but when you, where is it here? The condition, if you are in tune with the Spirit of truth indwelling you, you're saved from the devastation that those states of consciousness can cause, right? You're able to rise above that. The arrow misses you. Because, you live in impatience, you live in anxiety, you live in fear, you live in anxiousness, or you have those experiences. How do you protect yourself from the consequences of those states of consciousness? And we're told right here that if we are in tune with the Spirit of truth indwelling, we shall be saved from the devastation that overwhelms those negative states of mind. How? We are commanded to build an ark. That is, to abide in the realization of the one presence and the one power that we affirm here every week, right? So that's one reason to come every Sunday. Once a week, you have an opportunity to affirm one presence, one power, one love. This idea of one presence, one power, one love is brought out in the 91st Psalm, where the promise is made to the one who dwells in the secret place of the Most High. And in the 91st Psalm it says, 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but no harm shall come nigh thee. And I wrote in my e-message last week or the week before about the secret place of the Most High. The promise is made to those who dwell in the secret place of the Most High. If you're running in and out of it, in for 5 minutes, out, in on Tuesday, this Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, if you don't have a regular discipline of dwelling in the consciousness of spirit, then the promise isn't effective for you. She says, we should not be afraid when dread conditions appear. We can go into the ark that we have built with many declarations of truth, and there we shall be safe. Safe. Safe, safe. All right. So now we know Noah is what's Noah? Peaceful, restful, calm. The ark is that saving grace. And we're ready to go. The ark is built by you, constructed board by board in your consciousness. And when you use spiritual principle over and over, and you make declarations of truth and affirmations of truth, you build a stronghold of faith, and you come to abide in the one presence, power, and love of God. And then that lifts you, when a flood comes, it lifts you above the experience. You can go into your ark, I like to say, peace be still. But when I'm in the midst of a lot of stuff coming on me, I like to say, pace be still. Let my pace slow down. Slow down. And then I'm lifted above the situation, no matter how distressing it may seem, and I find that I'm shut away or shut in with God in perfect safety, lifted above whatever's bothering me. You know that I like to memorize poetry, and so you have to find a way that works for you to get into that Noah calm peace of mind. For me, this is the poem that I say over and over, and parts of the phrases from it that help me. Drop thy still dews of quietness, drop thy still dews of quietness, till all my strivings cease. Take from my soul the strain and stress, and let my ordered life confess the beauty of thy peace. Breathe through the heats of my desires thy stillness and thy calm. Let sense be dumb, let flesh retire, speak through the earthquake, wind and fire, O still small voice of calm. So calm comes in there twice. Drop thy still dews of quietness till all my strivings cease. This is, you have to take an affirmation, a declaration, a truth that works for you, that you can repeat to yourself to move yourself into that state of calm. And then you get there, and then the rains come, 40 days, 40 nights. You've been in unity, everyone here, long enough to know the number 4, 40, 400, multiples of 4, means a sufficient length of time for something to be accomplished. So it rains for 40 days and 40 nights. We see that when Jesus is in the wilderness 40 days, the Israelites wander in the desert for 40 years. It rains 40 days and 40 nights. 40 is the number that it takes to make the shift in consciousness, for the completion of the work, for the flood of light or the flood of thoughts or the flood of aha moments to come that can then release or unhook you from the charge of what's happening in your life. In the story, the waters prevail, the baptism of spirit prevails as long as necessary to cleanse the consciousness so it's able to restore you to your true self. And sometimes there's a lot of lessons, like we see with Will. He had arrogance and impatience and all kinds of things that he had to wake up to. The ark lands on Mount Ararat, which means it comes to rest on a high and holy place. You finally land in a high and holy state of consciousness. And then what happens? Let's see. After the storm abated, Noah built an altar to Jehovah and offered sacrifices. The altar in this case represents an abiding resolution of the spiritual-minded one, Noah, who makes a covenant with the Lord to continue to sacrifice his sensations, the human ways of thinking that we get it wrong, and to transmute them on the spiritual plane. We should do this when we have been protected through a great trial. So you get through it, you get the aha moments, the flood of light comes. Sometimes it's a flood of pain that comes, that drives you to the awareness of what's happening. And then you make a covenant to stay spiritually minded, to sacrifice that negativity, that arrogance, that impatience, that whatever, and to stay spiritual minded, and then to give thanks. We should do this when we've been protected through a great trial. A lot of times people have a major trauma in their life, and it's followed by major illness because they're processing the trauma in the physicality of their body. So what happens is, if you have a major trauma in your body, you want to get into the Noah state of consciousness and lift yourself out of whatever might have been sourcing that illness, that trauma, so that it washes out of you so it doesn't manifest as an illness. Does that make sense? Yes? That's another interactive part. Okay. Yes, and yes. Where are we here? The practical lessons. Here we go. The Noah consciousness understands that to conform rigorously to the will of God, far from involving loss of any kind, can only mean a better and more splendid life. And that flood of stuff comes on you. You learn this and that about yourself, and I didn't see that I was doing that, and wow, Thank you, God, for showing me all of this. The Noah consciousness knows, regardless of how overwhelming the conditions surrounding you, you can be lifted above it. You can build an ark of calm and keep the imaginings of your heart on God only. The Noah consciousness knows when you give your mental agreement to the positive imaginings of your heart, the spiritual forces that created the world and sustain the entire universe are available to help you, because you're now in right relationship mentally, emotionally, and spiritually to the infinite power of the universe. And so you want to be still and let Spirit do what it knows to be necessary to cleanse your consciousness. Let it do it. Don't dictate the ways and the means, but stay open and hearing, obedient, listening at depth, because you are working with the power of the infinite. And see this experience of the baptism of Spirit. See this flood of trouble, not as trouble or pain or suffering, but as a flood of light, as a flood of baptism of Spirit. And then when your mind achieves that state of poise and truth, everything false is going to dissolve away. For Will, it was a flood of pain that caused him to stop and go into the ark of a peaceful calm and direct the imaginings of his heart to a higher purpose. Here's the prayer that he sent to me, that he had written, and I'll share it with you as we close. Said, my prayer is to be cleansed of anything that would hold me back, keep me small, or limit me in any way. Cleanse me of anything that would fight against my success. Let any part of me that would argue for my limitations be washed away. Let me release every but, because, maybe, and you don't understand. Cleanse me of false ideas like most new businesses fail. It takes 3 to 5 years before you see any profits. You don't have the right skill set, the right contacts, the right marketing plan. You can't find the right employees. The design is flawed. The product needs more development. Cleanse me. Let me release any opinions or beliefs that do not serve the greater good and have the courage to move forward. Give me the courage to call on the highest within me. Empower me to keep the imaginings of my heart on success only. Empower me to keep the imaginings of my heart on God only. Today, I take God as my partner. Today, I covenant with God for the success of my business. Today, I rise up to create an exceptional life for myself, my family, and my customers. Amen. So let's take a moment and seal this now in prayer in your heart. If there's any floodwaters, any baptism of Spirit going on in your life, today we can celebrate and know that it is a baptism of the light, that it is an expansion of your consciousness, that it is there for the purpose of spiritual growth, to move you into a way of living and being and doing that's more powerful, profound, and loving than you have ever been before in your life. And so you anchor in a calming affirmation that soothes your heart, and you let it lift you above the experience. And you dwell in that secret place of the Most High until the waters subside and the dry land appears. And you go forward in covenant with Spirit to stay spiritually minded, spiritually awake. Drop thy still dews of quietness till all my strivings cease. Take from my soul the strain and stress, and let my ordered life confess the beauty of thy peace. And so it is. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Amen.